The 1970s didn't just change horror, they set it on fire. Filmmakers pushed beyond taste and tolerance, and sometimes the projectionists had to pull the plug. Councils voted. Police showed up. Prints vanished overnight. These weren't just movies, they were public battles about fear, faith, and freedom. Tonight, we reopen the case files on 14 titles too hot for theaters to handle. 1. The Exorcist, 1973. Picture the queue curling around a winter block, church groups handing out leaflets, paramedics on standby, whispers about fainting in the aisles. William Friedkin's The Exorcist didn't merely scare audiences, it rattled entire towns. In the United States, local authorities tried to halt screenings, and one Mississippi theater saw its staff arrested after the opening show, an obscenity conviction later overturned on appeal. In Boston, officials attempted to block showings. A court stepped in, but theaters were told not to admit minors. The uproar only deepened overseas. In the United Kingdom, protests by religious groups pushed local councils to pre-screen the film before granting permission, and some areas banned it entirely. Years later, the panic followed the title into living rooms. After the Video Recordings Act, regulators forced The Exorcist off UK home video shelves for over a decade. All this for a studio picture that plays like a courtroom drama of faith, staging a duel between doubt and belief around a child in peril. Culturally, it became the flashpoint for modern possession cinema and a shorthand for taboo-breaking horror, the kind that lingers in headlines as much as nightmares. Whether viewers saw blasphemy, redemption, or a mirror held up to fear, the result was the same: lines out the door, ambulances at the curb, and local bans that turned one movie into a national argument about what images a community should be allowed to see. 2. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Sun-baked roads, an abandoned farmhouse, the sound of a generator, and a door slamming like a guillotine. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre arrived with such ferocity that rumor quickly outpaced reality. People swore it was soaked in gore, even though most horror is implied. The effect was raw, documentary, and, according to British censors, intolerable. After a brief London run, the BBFC refused national certification. Without that license, mainstream distribution was effectively blocked. Local councils occasionally overruled the decision for limited screenings, but the prevailing message was clear: too intense for public exhibition. Reports circulated of U.S. theaters canceling bookings after complaints, and the film's title itself became a cultural trigger. At one point, imitators were cautioned against even using the word chainsaw in their marketing. What did audiences see in it? America's post-Vietnam anxieties, the collapse of rural myths, the horror of meeting a family that treats strangers as livestock. What did censors see? A sustained assault of terror that couldn't be softened by trims. Ironically, the bans made the film feel dangerous, transforming a low-budget shocker into a rite of passage whispered about on playgrounds and in zines. Decades later, the UK finally relented, and the film was recognized as a pillar of modern horror craft. A lesson in sound design, pacing, and how suggestion can be more scarring than splatter. Still, its early history remains a case study in how moral panic can weaponize bureaucracy to yank a movie off screens, precisely the kind of pushback that ensures a legend never dies. 3. Snuff, 1976. A cheap exploitation movie with a wicked idea: sell themselves as real. Snuff began life as a scrappy biker picture, then was retooled with a final coda that pretended to show an on-camera killing. The hoax worked a little too well. Outside the frame, protests erupted, especially from women's groups, arguing that the film normalized cruelty and traded on urban legends. In multiple U.S. cities, officials leaned on exhibitors. Theaters in Santa Clara, Philadelphia, and St. Paul were ordered to stop showing it. In Rochester, demonstrators smashed a lobby poster case. Arrests followed. Elsewhere, a theater owner faced obscenity charges for exhibiting the film. The spectacle around the spectacle became the whole show. Talk shows, editorials, hand-wringing about dangerous trends, and a boom in midnight screenings that fed on controversy. Culturally, Snuff is less a movie than a milestone in media panic, a moment when rumor, advertising, and moral outrage fused into box office. It also laid down a grim template for future marketing stunts. Blur the line between fiction and reportage, dare the audience to look, then let the backlash do your publicity. Was anyone fooled? Maybe not for long, but the damage and the fascination were done. Prints were pulled under pressure, which only stoked curiosity. Today, Snuff stands as a cautionary tale. Once you invite the myth of reality into your horror, you may discover the real terror is waiting in the lobby, chanting, picketing, and forcing the projector to go dark. Fourth last house on the left, 1972. Wes Craven's directorial debut didn't just test boundaries, it tore them down. Shot on a shoestring budget, Last House on the Left arrived as a reimagining of Bergman's The Virgin Spring, but stripped of art house elegance and soaked in raw, relentless brutality. The tagline, "To avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie," wasn't marketing hyperbole, it was a warning. In the US, controversy erupted instantly. Some theaters pulled it after a single weekend following walkouts and angry letters. Overseas, the United Kingdom's BBFC refused to grant certification, leading to decades of prohibition under the infamous Video Nasties list. Even heavily edited versions were rejected. In Australia, censorship boards demanded so many cuts that distribution became impractical, effectively keeping it out of circulation. Critics were polarized. Roger Ebert praised its raw power, while others dismissed it as a moral collapse on film. For audiences, it was an endurance test, a mirror held up to the ugliest corners of human cruelty. Ironically, the very elements that led to its banning cemented its legacy in horror history. Craven's debut became a symbol of the decade's grindhouse daring, a film that forced viewers to reckon with the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the scariest monsters are entirely human. Its pulling from theaters didn't erase it. It ensured that, for years, whispers about the film too awful to show kept it alive in the underground. 5. Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salo is not a conventional horror film, but few who have seen it would deny its place among cinema's most harrowing experiences. Adapted from the Marquis de Sade's novel and set in the dying days of Mussolini's regime, it blends political allegory with extreme depictions of degradation and control. The result was an art house horror of the soul, one that governments worldwide deemed unacceptable. Upon release, Italy banned it outright. Prints were seized, and Pasolini faced obscenity charges. In the UK, it remained unreleased for decades, surfacing only in heavily cut editions after long legal battles. Australia refused classification, while New Zealand placed it on a prohibited publications list. What made Salo so radioactive wasn't just the imagery, but the implication that fascism's worst crimes could be enacted not only in prisons and battlefields, but in private rooms, under the guise of ritualized order. For many, the horror was too close to history, too plausible to dismiss. Pasolini never lived to see the long shadow his final film would cast. He was murdered shortly before its premiere. Today, Salo is studied in universities as much as it's condemned, a disturbing reminder that some films are banned not only because of what they show, but because of what they dare to suggest about human nature and power. 6. Don't Go in the House, 1979. Released at the tail end of the decade, Joseph Ellison's Don't Go in the House seemed tailor-made to rile censors. The story of a disturbed man who burns women alive in a steel-lined room was enough to ignite outrage before the credits rolled. Shot with a clinical coldness, the film unsettled not through fast-paced gore, but with an unblinking lens on violence and isolation. In the United Kingdom, it joined the ranks of the video nasties, banned under the Obscene Publications Act. Ireland refused classification outright, and even in the United States, several states pushed for edits before allowing screenings. Critics accused it of reveling in cruelty. Defenders argued it was a psychological horror exploring the making of a killer. The controversy made it a late-night rental legend, whispered about in video store aisles and passed around as a rite of passage for hardened horror fans. Its theater run was spotty. Some cinemas pulled it midweek after bad press, but in the home video underground, it found a dedicated audience. Over time, Don't Go in the House became a case study in how moral outrage could boost a film's notoriety. Without the bans and the headlines, it might have faded into obscurity. Instead, it endures as one of the most chilling and most suppressed grindhouse tales of the 70s. 7. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. When Wes Craven followed Last House on the Left with The Hills Have Eyes, he traded suburban horror for the barren, sun-blasted terror of the desert. The film's tale of a family ambushed by a feral clan in the Nevada wilderness wasn't just unsettling. It struck nerves about societal collapse and survivalism in post-Vietnam America. Shot on a small budget in blistering conditions, it combined a documentary-like rawness with moments of shocking violence. In the United Kingdom, censors demanded extensive cuts before it could be released, and even then, local councils in certain regions refused to screen it. It was later swept into the video nasties panic of the early 80s, with prosecutors using its disturbing imagery as evidence of public harm. Australia also imposed strict censorship, leading to heavily truncated versions circulating through underground video markets. In the US, some theaters pulled it after audience complaints, especially in conservative areas. Craven's knack for balancing brutality with social commentary turned the ban into free publicity, cementing the film as an essential entry in the survival horror subgenre. Over time, its status shifted from dangerous contraband to celebrated cult classic, proof that suppression can sometimes immortalize what it seeks to erase. Eighth Mark of the Devil, 1970. From its opening minutes, Mark of the Devil declared war on subtlety. Marketed with the slogan, "Guaranteed to upset your stomach," and accompanied by free vomit bags for theater patrons, Michael Armstrong's film dove headfirst into the grim world of 18th century witch hunts. With scenes of torture portrayed in stomach-turning detail, it was more relentless than even audiences accustomed to hammer horror. In the UK, distributors faced significant pushback, and local councils banned it outright in several towns. West Germany heavily censored the film, trimming some of its most infamous moments before release. In the US, Mark of the Devil was yanked from select theaters after public complaints, with one New Jersey town forcing it out after just a few days. Critics dismissed it as gratuitous, but audiences, particularly in grindhouse circuits, embraced its shameless excess. The controversy transformed it into a badge of honor for horror completists, an endurance test to prove one's mettle. Today, it's remembered as one of the decade's most lurid exercises in shock marketing, where the legend of its bans is inseparable from the film itself. 9. The House on Straw Hill, 1976. Also known under various alternate titles to skirt censorship boards, The House on Straw Hill blended psychological horror with exploitation elements to tell the story of a reclusive author spiraling into paranoia and violence. Its uneasy mix of art house pacing and sudden, jarring brutality made it a prime target for moral watchdogs. In the United Kingdom, the film was placed on the Video Nasties list and effectively banned for years under the Obscene Publications Act. Even before home video panic, certain local authorities had refused to grant it theatrical licenses, citing its corrosive impact on community standards. Australia followed suit with outright bans, and New Zealand's film board prohibited it entirely. While critics were generally hostile, some noted its atmospheric tension and experimental style, hinting that it aspired to more than exploitation. Nonetheless, its pull from theaters ensured its fate as a collector's item, whispered about in fan circles and sold in bootleg markets. In hindsight, the banning of The House on Straw Hill illustrates how films on the fringe, too unconventional for mainstream success, sometimes achieve lasting fame precisely because they're driven underground. All right, here's part 4 with the next 3 controversial 70s horror films, each in the 350 to 400 word range, same immersive documentary tone, and loaded with the controversy impact censorship arc you wanted. 10. The Witch Who Came from the Sea, 1976. From the title alone, audiences might have expected a supernatural chiller. Instead, The Witch Who Came from the Sea delivered something far more unsettling, a psychological descent into trauma, madness, and violent fantasy. Directed by Matt Cimber, the film follows a woman haunted by disturbing visions, with her delusions spilling into brutal acts. It was shot with a hazy, dreamlike quality that made its moments of violence all the more jarring. In the United Kingdom, the BBFC refused certification, placing it firmly on the Video Nasties list. This meant it was effectively banned from legal distribution for years, surviving only in heavily edited imports and underground VHS swaps. The controversy was heightened by its misleading marketing, which promised ocean-bound witchcraft but delivered a disturbing, character-driven spiral. In the U.S., while it was never formally banned, some theaters canceled bookings after early audience walkouts and critical backlash. For years, it remained infamous, more for its absence than its availability. Modern critics have since reevaluated it as a strange, unsettling piece of 70s cinema, less about literal witchcraft than about the corrosive power of buried trauma. Its removal from theaters gave it the aura of a cursed object, a film that, once unseen, only became more powerful in the imagination. 11. Blood-Sucking Freaks, 1976. Joel M. Reed's Blood-Sucking Freaks wasn't designed to be subtle. Set. In a depraved off-Broadway theater where the line between performance and cruelty collapses entirely, the film made itself an easy target for moral outrage. From the moment it hit grindhouse screens in New York, protesters, particularly from women's rights groups, organized pickets demanding theaters drop it. In Philadelphia, police raided a screening, seizing reels as evidence of obscenity. The title was eventually pulled from several U.S. theaters under public pressure. Overseas, the UK refused classification entirely, and other countries like Australia and New Zealand followed with outright bans. Critics widely condemned it as irredeemable trash, but among exploitation fans, the film's notoriety became its main selling point. It played sporadically at midnight screenings for years, trading on its banned status to draw in curious crowds. The combination of low-budget shock tactics, unapologetic excess, and a deliberate dare to censors made Blood-Sucking Freaks one of the most enduring too-far titles of the decade. Proof that sometimes being pulled from theaters can cement a film's legend as effectively as a blockbuster run. 12. House of Whipcord, 1974. Pete Walker's House of Whipcord occupies a strange intersection between British social commentary and sadistic horror. On its surface, it's a grim morality tale about a young woman lured into a private prison run by a retired judge and his sadistic partner. Beneath that, it's a critique of authoritarianism and moral hypocrisy. Unfortunately for Walker, many censors only saw the cruelty, not the commentary. In the UK, some local councils refused to book the film, while others allowed only heavily cut versions to screen. In New Zealand and parts of Australia, it was denied classification entirely. Critics were split. Some dismissed it as exploitation dressed up as social critique, while others recognized it as part of Walker's larger pattern of pushing against moral conservatism. The bans only added to its mystique, making it a sought-after title among British horror collectors. Over the years, its reputation has shifted. What was once dismissed as pulp is now often read as a sharp, if grim, satire on how societies justify cruelty under the guise of justice. In pulling it from theaters, authorities may have inadvertently amplified its message, ensuring that audiences would seek it out for decades to come. 13. Flesh for Frankenstein, 1973. Also known as Andy Warhol's Frankenstein in some territories, Paul Morrissey's Flesh for Frankenstein was never intended for polite audiences. A grotesque, surreal spin on Mary Shelley's tale, it blended camp, art house stylings, and moments of extreme gore into a fever dream that baffled mainstream critics and delighted cult audiences. Released in 3D in some markets, its confrontational tone and grotesque humor clashed with the standards of the day. In the United Kingdom, it faced immediate scrutiny, with several local councils refusing to grant licenses for theatrical screenings. Australia banned it outright, and Italy demanded severe cuts before release. Even in the United States, certain states pulled it after only a few days of play, citing complaints about its depravity. The controversy was stoked further by Morrissey's own public statements, which leaned into the outrage rather than softening it. Over time, Flesh for Frankenstein has been re-evaluated by scholars as a dark satire on both the horror genre and the social politics of the early 70s. At the time, however, the bans and removals gave it the air of something forbidden, something you had to know the right theater or the right bootleg dealer to see. Like many films on this list, its pulling from theaters only deepened its cult appeal, ensuring it lived on far beyond its original troubled run. 14. The Devils, 1971. Ken Russell's The Devils stands as one of the most notorious censorship battles in cinema history. Loosely based on Aldous Huxley's The Devils of Loudun and John Whiting's play, the film recounts a real 17th century case of mass hysteria and political maneuvering within a French convent. Oliver Reed and Vanessa Redgrave gave powerhouse performances in a production that mixed Baroque visuals with unflinching depictions of religious and political corruption. From the start, it was a lightning rod. The British Board of Film Censors demanded extensive cuts before granting an X certificate, and even then, many local councils banned it entirely. The U.S. saw a similarly fractured release, with different states mandating their own edits or barring it altogether. In several countries, including Italy and New Zealand, the film was outright banned for decades. Warner Bros. Itself has long resisted releasing a fully uncut version, even for home video. Culturally, The Devils became a symbol of the struggle between artistic freedom and societal boundaries, a film discussed in whispers and studied in film schools, but rarely seen in its entirety. Its history is a testament to how a work can be both celebrated and suppressed, how bands can create a legend so powerful that it overshadows the work itself. The 70s were an era when horror wasn't just entertainment. It was a cultural fault line. Each ban, each pulled screening, each moral outcry only fueled curiosity. These films remind us that fear doesn't just live on screen. It lives in what society tries to hide. And hiding it? That's impossible.